What happens when quiet dignity collides with prejudice at 35,000 feet? What if the woman humiliated in front of a cabin full of strangers wasn't just any passenger, but the CEO who owned the very jet they were flying on? This is the story of Dr. Naomi Sinclair, a calm, brilliant black woman whose seat in first class became the battleground for something far larger than legroom or status. A flight attendant's careless cruelty ignited a chain of events that spiraled into a global reckoning. Live streams captured every moment. Passengers held their breath. The world tuned in. But here's the question when you're accused of not belonging in a place you rightfully earned. How do you respond? Do you fight with anger, or do you hold steady until the truth shakes the ground beneath those who doubted you tonight? You'll witness how one woman's unshakable calm forced an airline, the FAA, and even Congress to listen. A story of humiliation turned into power, of silence broken into reform. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's step into the cabin of Flight 618. The words fell like a slap across the cabin. Ma'am, first class isn't for everyone. People like you should know your place. The voice wasn't loud at first, but sharp enough that it cut through the low hum of conversation. The sound of seatbelts clicking stopped mid-snap. Coffee cups hovered halfway to lips. Every eye shifted toward the front row, where the tension suddenly thickened like cabin pressure dropping before turbulence. The first-class cabin of Orion Airlines Flight 618 preparing for departure from Chicago, O'Hare to New York, had been calm only moments before. Soft music drifted faintly overhead, the kind of background tune meant to soothe anxious flyers. A golden stream of late afternoon sunlight cut through the oval windows, painting warm patches across navy leather seats. For a brief while, the space had felt serene, but now silence wrapped around it, charged, waiting. At seat 1A sat Dr. Naomi Sinclair, 41 years old, founder and CEO of Sinclair Aerotech, the quiet architect behind some of the most advanced maintenance software in aviation. Her tailored gray suit was understated but perfect, her pearl earrings catching a glint of light. She carried herself with a calm composure that often unsettled those who expected arrogance from power. Naomi wasn't scrolling social media or staring idly out the window. She was reviewing notes for a high-stakes board presentation scheduled in Manhattan the next morning. Her stylus tapped lightly against her tablet, the sound steady, deliberate. She seemed entirely at peace, until the words came. Her eyes lifted slowly from the screen. Across the narrow aisle, a few passengers glanced quickly away, pretending to refocus on their champagne or their phones. Others stared openly, their curiosity mingled with something else: judgment, disbelief, a hunger to see what would happen next. Naomi inhaled, quiet and controlled, the way she had practiced for years. She did not answer right away. Instead, she let the silence stretch, a small act of power in itself. She had heard it all before, in boardrooms, at conferences, even during moments when she was the keynote speaker yet still mistaken for an assistant. She carried the scars invisibly, deep inside, and sometimes the echoes of those voices returned at the worst times. Not again, she thought. Not here. Not in this cabin where all she wanted was to cross 2 states in peace. The attendant who had spoken, Melissa Grant, marched down the aisle with clipped steps, her service tablet tucked tightly against her arm. She was young enough to still burn with ambition, yet worn enough by back-to-back shifts that her frustration showed plainly. Her voice sharpened as she stopped by Naomi's seat. "I need to see your boarding pass again." Naomi didn't flinch. She simply set her stylus down and handed the slip forward. Melissa glanced at it quickly. Then her brows knitted. "This isn't right. You need to move to coach immediately." A ripple of discomfort moved through the cabin. Seat belts rattled as passengers shifted. A cough broke from the back row, quickly stifled. Naomi spoke softly, her voice calm but carrying across the hush. "There must be a mistake. Please call your supervisor." Melissa's lips thinned, her irritation flashing. "Supervisor, ma'am. You're moving now or I'm calling security." The words hung heavy, weighted with the arrogance of certainty. 2 rows behind, a young man with tousled hair leaned sideways, his phone already raised. Tyler Brooks, known to thousands online as a prankster streamer, whispered to his growing audience, "Yo, guys, we've got something brewing here. Someone trying to sneak into first class. Watch this." His live count ticked upward from 40 viewers to 80 within seconds. Naomi saw the glow of his screen in her peripheral vision. She knew instantly what it meant. The moment had slipped out of the cabin and onto the internet. It wasn't just her against an irritated flight attendant now. It was her against the judgment of strangers, of an audience hungry for spectacle. Her heart pressed heavier in her chest. She remembered her mother's voice years ago. "Dignity isn't something they hand you, Naomi. It's something you hold, even when they try to strip it away." She could feel that memory rising now like a shield. Melissa straightened, noticing the camera, her tone loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a passenger attempting to occupy a first-class seat without a valid ticket." A soft gasp broke from an elderly couple in row 2. Another passenger cleared his throat awkwardly. Tyler grinned wider, angling his camera to capture Naomi's face. His chat was exploding already. Comments rolling in drag her out. "No way she belongs there." "Fraud." Others posted laughing emojis. A few, though, pushed back, "Show the ticket." What if she's legit? Naomi sat perfectly still, her Hermes tote resting against her feet. Her boarding pass laid neatly back on the tray table. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was measured, almost gentle. "I will wait here. If verification is needed, I'll wait for the highest-ranking officer available." The stillness of her response seemed to irritate Melissa further. Frustration lined the attendant's face as she reached suddenly, snatched the boarding pass from the tray, scanned it once more, then tossed it back sharply. The paper struck Naomi's chest with a soft but cutting snap. The sound was louder than any shout. Naomi's fingers moved slowly, deliberately. She picked the boarding pass from her lap, smoothed the crease, and placed it back on the tray. She adjusted her jacket, met Melissa's eyes, and repeated, calm as ever, "Call your manager." The cabin held its breath. Phones glowed. Tyler's live count hit 200. Naomi did not look at the camera, did not even glance around. Her stillness was both a refusal and a challenge. She would not be moved, but inside her chest, her pulse thudded harder. Each beat a question. Should I keep quiet? Let this pass like the 100 other insults before? Or is today the day I stop letting silence do the work for them? As the hum of the jet bridge echoed faintly in the distance, Naomi knew the choice was approaching faster than takeoff. Melissa Grant's heels clicked against the polished aisle floor as though each step carried the weight of authority. Her service tablet, clutched tightly against her side, reflected the glare of the overhead light. She had been working back-to-back shifts for 3 days, every smile forced, every request for sparkling water or a blanket, another chip against her patience. To Melissa, first class wasn't simply a cabin, it was a battlefield of entitlement, one where attendants like her were expected to balance hospitality with control. And today, she felt control slipping the moment her eyes landed on Naomi Sinclair. She leaned forward, her voice edged with irritation. I said, "Move to coach. Ma'am, this seat is not for you." The words echoed again, harsher now, resonating off the quiet cabin walls. Naomi did not move. Her hands rested lightly on the armrests of seat 1A, her breathing steady, though, inside her chest. A storm churned. Naomi had learned long ago that silence often spoke louder than argument. As a black woman in leadership, she'd carried composure like armor, knowing the moment she raised her voice, the narrative would twist, angry, aggressive, difficult, labels designed to erase her dignity. So she let Melissa's words hang in the air, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a fight. But her silence wasn't weakness. It was calculation. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man adjusted his glasses, pretending to focus on his newspaper, though his eyes flicked upward every few seconds. A woman 2 rows back tapped rapidly on her phone. Her lips pursed. The cabin had transformed into an audience. Melissa, sensing both pressure and opportunity, shifted her weight. She wasn't just enforcing procedure, not anymore. Now she was performing. Her gaze dropped briefly to Naomi's lap, where the boarding pass sat neatly on the tray table, printed clearly in bold 1A, first class. Melissa had seen it. She had held it. Yet something inside her insisted it couldn't be right. A mistake, perhaps, or a trick, because in Melissa's tired mind, first class had a certain look, a certain expectation, and Naomi Sinclair didn't fit it. She reached again, snatching the pass with a sharp motion, scanning it, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then she tossed it back, letting the paper strike Naomi's chest once more. The sound, small but sharp, sent another ripple through the cabin. Naomi caught the boarding pass mid-slide before it slipped to the floor. She placed it back on the tray, aligning it precisely, a small act of reclaiming control. Then she lifted her eyes, her voice calm and even. "Call your supervisor." Melissa's jaw tightened. Something inside her bristled at the calmness, the refusal to break. She wanted compliance, immediate and unquestioning. Instead, she felt herself losing ground. A sudden chuckle drifted from row 3. Tyler Brooks had his phone raised higher now, the small red dot blinking as he streamed live to his growing audience. "She's about to get dragged out," he whispered, his grin widening. "Watch this, guys. It's about to blow." On his screen, comments poured in, some cruel, some gleeful, a few questioning. The number at the top corner climbed steadily. 3 digits, then 4. Naomi knew the camera was there. She could feel its presence, its gaze heavier than any pair of eyes in the cabin. The internet was ruthless, quicker to condemn than to listen. She exhaled through her nose, measured and steady, though inside she felt the sting of vulnerability. The thought whispered in her chest, "Not again, not in front of strangers, not turned into a caricature for views." Melissa folded her arms, standing tall, her voice rising deliberately. "Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot allow a passenger to occupy first class without the proper ticket. We will resolve this swiftly." The elderly couple in row 2 exchanged glances. The husband leaned slightly toward his wife, murmuring something neither dared say aloud. They had flown Orion Airlines for years, had seen mistakes and missteps, but never something that carried this edge of hostility. Naomi spoke again, her voice lower now, directed only at Melissa, though everyone heard. "I have the proper ticket. I've presented it twice. If you have doubts, bring your manager." Melissa's cheeks flushed, whether from anger or embarrassment, no one could tell. She hesitated, the weight of passengers' eyes pressing against her spine. Tyler's phone hovered, capturing every flicker of expression. Inside her head, Naomi's thoughts churned. Should she reveal her identity now? Pull rank, expose her position, remind them all that she was not just a passenger, but the owner of dozens of aircraft Orion flew. Her instinct urged patience. Timing mattered. To speak too soon might sound like arrogance. To wait might reveal more than she ever could by force. The decision gnawed at her, pulling threads of memory. She recalled the first contract negotiation 10 years earlier, sitting across a boardroom of men twice her age, the doubt in their eyes, the way one had asked if she was filling in for her boss. She had smiled then, silent until the ink dried and her company became the vendor they could not live without. Silence had won her that battle. But this wasn't a boardroom. This was a cabin filled with strangers and cameras. Naomi steadied herself. "Call your supervisor," she repeated, her words deliberate, final. Melissa tapped her headset, her voice sharp. "Security to gate C-14. Passenger dispute. Immediate." The announcement crackled faintly through the overhead speakers. Somewhere down the jet bridge. Footsteps shifted. The air seemed to thicken, as though the cabin itself braced for confrontation. Tyler whispered into his phone, "It's happening. Security's on the way. You guys, this is insane." His viewer count spiked again. The elderly couple looked down at their laps. The man folded his newspaper without reading a word. The woman's hand rested lightly on his, both of them unwilling to speak, yet visibly unsettled. A young woman, seated in 2C, pressed her lips together, her hands trembling slightly. Isabella Reyes, a Latina intern on her first cross-country business trip, had caught a glimpse of Naomi's boarding pass earlier. She knew it was valid, knew this entire spectacle was wrong. But fear sealed her throat. Speaking up could mean risking her internship, her dream job, her future. She fidgeted, torn between conscience and survival. 2 seats over, Gerald Hunt, a retired pilot with decades in the industry, observed quietly. His gray eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. He had seen too many incidents like this, too many passengers singled out unjustly. He leaned slightly toward Isabella, his voice low but firm. "That ticket's good, isn't it?" Isabella nodded faintly, unable to form words. Gerald exhaled, heavy with years of frustration. "Thought so." The sound of approaching boots grew louder, closer, echoing down the jet bridge. Conversations died entirely. Phones tilted higher, dozens of recording lenses aimed forward. Tyler's grin widened as though the moment was a show made for him alone. Naomi didn't move. She adjusted her suit jacket, folded her hands neatly in her lap, and fixed her gaze forward. Her chest tightened, but her posture remained regal, unshaken, inside. She weighed the moment, the choice between silence and revelation, between enduring humiliation once more or unleashing the truth of who she was. Her heart whispered that this day, this flight, might be different. as the figure of Security Officer Marcus Lee appeared at the cabin door. Tall, broad-shouldered, his expression unreadable. Naomi felt the entire plane hold its breath. The battle for dignity had only just begun. Marcus Lee's entrance shifted the energy instantly. The tall security officer stepped into the narrow cabin doorway. His uniform crisp, his expression steady but unreadable. He scanned the room once, his eyes moving from Melissa Grant's tense stance to Naomi Sinclair's calm composure. The air around him seemed to settle into a strange mix of anticipation and unease, as though everyone was holding their breath. "Ma'am," Marcus began, his voice low and controlled. "I need to verify your ticket." Before Naomi could respond, Melissa interjected quickly, her tone sharp, her words clipped. "She's refusing to move. We can't delay this flight any longer. She doesn't belong here." The words rang louder than intended, amplified by the silence of every passenger listening. Naomi lifted her eyes, steady and unflinching. Her boarding pass still rested neatly on the tray in front of her, the bold letters clear as daylight, first class. "Seat 1A. Naomi spoke softly, but her voice carried, "I've provided my boarding pass twice. If further verification is required, I'll wait for the highest-ranking officer available. Please call your captain." The composure in her tone unsettled Melissa. She wanted Naomi flustered, defensive, maybe angry. Instead, she got calm defiance, and it rattled her. Tyler Brooks leaned closer into his phone, whispering into the tiny microphone with the thrill of a showman. "Guys, you're watching this live. Look at her. She's not even budging. This is insane." His live stream viewer count had crossed 600, the chat box filling with rapid-fire comments. "Kick her off. She looks too calm to be guilty. This is discrimination. Show the ticket again." Melissa's eyes flicked toward Tyler's phone. For a split second, her posture straightened, as though remembering the invisible crowd now watching her every move. She raised her chin, her voice louder, more deliberate. "Rules are rules. First class is for paying customers only. We cannot make exceptions." Naomi let the words settle, then answered evenly, her gaze fixed on Melissa. "Everyone here paid. The only difference is how we choose to treat one another." The sentence cut through the cabin like a blade of glass. Conversations halted. A man in row 3 stopped mid-sip of his wine, his glass hovering. A woman across the aisle lowered her phone, her face conflicted. The silence after Naomi's words felt like thunder withheld. Melissa faltered, but pride hardened her features. "This will all be sorted when security removes you," she snapped, gesturing toward Marcus as if handing the burden off to him. Marcus didn't move immediately. He studied Naomi, her stillness, the precision of her words. Something about her presence pushed against his instincts. This wasn't the first time he had been called to resolve a dispute on a plane, but rarely did the accused sit with such unwavering calm. Naomi's phone vibrated on her tray, the screen lighting with notifications. She didn't look at it, though a small part of her longed to. She knew what she would see: messages from her legal team, her assistant, her public relations director. Word was already spreading beyond the cabin walls. Isabella Reyes sat frozen in 2C, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had seen the boarding pass. She knew the truth, but her throat tightened with fear. What if speaking up cost her everything she had worked for? What if siding against a senior attendant ruined her career before it even began? Her hands trembled as she fidgeted with the strap of her purse. Gerald Hunt leaned slightly toward her. His voice was gravelly, worn with years of flying, but steady. "You saw it, didn't you?" Isabella nodded faintly, whispering. It was first class. 1A. Gerald's jaw tightened. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes narrowing. He had flown through storms and mechanical failures, had stared down emergencies at 30,000 feet. But what he saw now, a woman's dignity hanging on the precipice of assumption, felt heavier than any turbulence he had ever encountered. Tyler's voice carried again, his tone gleeful. "She's about to get dragged out. Folks, look at this. They're calling security. She's not moving." His live stream shot past 1,000 viewers. The chat was a storm of emojis, arguments, accusations, but a shift was happening in real time. Some viewers zoomed in on the frame where Naomi's boarding pass sat clearly visible. Screenshots circulated online. Tweets and posts emerged. "She has the ticket. Why is she being harassed?" The tide of opinion, once cruel, began to tilt. Melissa didn't notice. She planted her hands on her hips, her chest heaving with self-righteous energy. "We cannot delay this flight for one passenger," she declared loudly. "This is first class. People pay thousands for these seats." Naomi's eyes met hers, calm and piercing. Her voice, soft but carrying, filled the space. "I paid for this seat, Miss Grant, as did everyone else here. The difference is, I don't record passengers to humiliate them." The words landed like a strike. Several passengers turned toward Tyler, whose smirk faltered for the first time. He angled the camera away slightly, uncertain. The livestream chat erupted, some mocking him, others cheering Naomi. Melissa's confidence wavered, but she pressed on. "Officer, please escort her out. We have procedures to follow." Marcus rested one hand lightly on his belt, his brows knitting. His voice, when it came, was firm. "I'll review the facts before making any decision." He turned to Naomi, his tone professional. "Ma'am, if you could confirm your ID with your boarding pass." Without hesitation. Naomi picked up both her boarding pass and her driver's license, handing them forward with the poise of someone who had nothing to hide. Marcus examined them carefully, cross-checking with his handheld device that displayed the flight manifest. Silence filled the cabin as he scrolled, the seconds stretching unbearably. Melissa crossed her arms, her foot tapping impatiently. Tyler angled his phone again, whispering theatrically, "This is it, guys, watch, watch." Marcus's brows furrowed as he stopped at Naomi's name. He looked up slowly, his eyes shifting from the screen to Melissa. "This pass shows first class, seat 1A. It's valid." The words dropped like a stone into the quiet. Gasps rippled through the passengers. Someone whispered, "I knew it." Isabella's heart leapt, relief flooding her chest. Gerald Hunt gave a small nod, his lips pressed into a grim line. Melissa blinked rapidly, stunned but recovering with defensive speed. She must have booked incorrectly or used points. That doesn't mean Naomi cut her off gently, her voice still calm. "My assistant booked this directly through Orion's corporate portal. Confirmation code XR93452. You're welcome to verify it." Her tone carried no anger, no arrogance, just facts. Irrefutable, undeniable facts. Melissa's cheeks burned as the cabin shifted around her. For the first time, she felt the weight of doubt pressing against her authority. The invisible audience, once a source of power, now seemed to be turning against her. Tyler's live stream count soared past 1,500. His chat, once filled with laughter, now overflowed with outrage. She showed the code, "Fire the attendant, this is discrimination, live on camera." Melissa straightened, her pride holding her together as she glanced toward Tyler's phone. She forced her voice louder, almost theatrical now. "This is going viral either way," she muttered under her breath, but the microphone caught it clearly. Naomi sat silently, her composure unshaken, her eyes steady. She knew the battle wasn't over, not yet, because once pride takes center stage, it never leaves quietly. The cabin of Orion Airlines Flight 618 felt suspended in time. Marcus Lee's words still lingered in the air. "This pass shows first class. Seat 1A. It's valid." Passengers shifted in their seats, glancing at each other, then back toward Naomi Sinclair. Relief flickered across a few faces, but the tension did not break. It deepened, because although the truth had been spoken, Melissa Grant remained standing in the aisle, her arms folded, her jaw set in stubborn defiance. Tyler Brooks kept his camera rolling, whispering into the lens. "You heard that, right? She's got the ticket, but they're still arguing. This is crazy." His viewer count surged past 2,000. Naomi adjusted her posture, resting her palms lightly on her knees. She could feel the weight of every eye in the cabin, some sympathetic, some skeptical, some hungry for the spectacle. Her chest rose and fell in measured rhythm, but inside she was fighting a storm. She had been through this cycle so many times before. Prove yourself again, and still somehow not be enough. Melissa's voice broke through the silence. "I don't care what the scanner says. Mistakes happen. People book incorrectly all the time. We can't risk delaying this flight. We need to move her." Naomi's lips parted slightly, but she stopped herself. Words would only fuel Melissa's fire. Instead, she folded her hands together and waited. From row 2C, Isabella Reyes squeezed the strap of her purse tighter, her knuckles whitening. She wanted to speak, wanted to shout the truth she had seen with her own eyes. Yet fear clamped her voice. Her internship at Orion meant everything. A single misstep could end it. Still, guilt burned in her chest like acid. Gerald Hunt, sitting in 2D, leaned forward. His deep voice carried a quiet authority that decades in the cockpit had carved into him. "I saw the boarding pass, too. It's valid. She belongs here." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Melissa's face tightened. She turned on Gerald, her tone edged with disdain. "Sir, please stay out of this. You're not authorized to make that judgment." Gerald didn't flinch. He held her gaze, calm but firm. "I don't need authorization to recognize the truth." The words settled heavily, strengthening the undercurrent of doubt swirling around Melissa. Tyler's chat exploded with reactions. Some mocked Melissa. Others cheered Gerald. A few urged Naomi to stand up for herself. Screenshots of the boarding pass visible in earlier frames of Tyler's live stream spread rapidly online. Hashtags began forming. Orion Flight 618, Naomi Sinclair. Seat 1A. Naomi's phone buzzed again, notifications piling in. She didn't look. She knew her legal team was watching the stream, already documenting everything. She knew her assistant was drafting statements, her communications director preparing for fallout. The story was no longer confined to the cabin. It was bleeding into the world outside. Melissa drew herself taller, as if doubling down could erase the truth. Officer Lee, this is unnecessary. Please, escort her out before we waste more time." Marcus shifted his stance, his brows furrowing. He had confirmed the ticket. His duty was clear. Yet the pressure in Melissa's tone pressed against him, the expectation that he would side with authority over accuracy. He hesitated, the weight of the cabin's silence pressing against his chest. Naomi finally spoke, her voice steady, deliberate. "I requested a supervisor 20 minutes ago. I will not be moved until your captain verifies this directly." Melissa scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "The captain doesn't need to get involved in seating disputes." Naomi's gaze didn't waver. "Then he can confirm it's not a dispute. Call him." The firmness in her words shifted something in the air. A few passengers nodded subtly, their quiet support tangible. Isabella bit her lip, her courage building like a fragile flame. Tyler leaned closer into his phone, whispering with theatrical awe, "She's asking for the captain. Guys, this is next level." His chat filled with fire emojis, clapping hands, raised fists. The spectacle was no longer just drama. It was a stage for something bigger. Melissa's pride flared, but hesitation cracked through her expression. Calling the captain meant escalating, meant admitting the issue wasn't as simple as she wanted it to be. She lingered, her silence betraying her uncertainty. Naomi pressed gently, her words carrying quiet steel. "Call him." Finally, Melissa tapped her headset, her voice clipped. "Captain Stone to the cabin. Passenger verification needed." The announcement sent another ripple of energy through the passengers. Some straightened, others whispered. Tyler's viewership jumped again, surging past 3,000. Moments later, Captain Harold Stone emerged from the cockpit. His presence filled the cabin instantly. Broad-shouldered, salt-and-pepper hair beneath his cap, his uniform sharp. 25 years of flying gave him a quiet authority that no one could question. He scanned the cabin with a single glance, sensing tension before a word was spoken. "What seems to be the issue?" he asked, his voice calm but commanding. Melissa stepped forward quickly, gesturing toward Naomi with a sharp tilt of her chin. "This passenger is in first class without the proper ticket." Naomi lifted her boarding pass from the tray and held it out silently. The captain took it, his eyes scanning the details, then cross-checking with Marcus's device. His brow furrowed, his jaw tightening slightly. "Dr. Naomi Sinclair," he read aloud. His eyes flicked from the pass to Naomi's composed face. Something in his expression shifted, recognition sparking behind his eyes. Melissa pressed on. Her voice rushed. She must have booked incorrectly. Maybe points, maybe an upgrade glitch. Either way, she shouldn't be here. Naomi's gaze never left the captain. She reached slowly into her tote and pulled out a slim, platinum-edged business card. Sliding it across the tray toward him, he took it, his eyes dropping to the embossed letters. His breath caught almost imperceptibly. Sinclair Aerotech, CEO. Captain Stone straightened, his voice lower now, his tone carrying weight. "Dr. Sinclair, I was not aware you were aboard. Allow me a moment to resolve this." The cabin erupted in whispers. Passengers leaned toward one another, murmuring in disbelief. Isabella's eyes widened, her heart racing. Gerald's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. Tyler swung his phone toward his own face, whispering to his viewers. "Yo, she's somebody big. Did you see that card? She's the CEO. This just flipped. His viewership shot past 5,000. Melissa froze, her confidence faltering. I didn't know," she stammered. Naomi's expression remained unreadable, her voice calm. "You didn't ask." The words fell heavy, undeniable. Melissa's face flushed as murmurs grew louder. Passengers exchanged glances, some shaking their heads, others lifting their phones higher to capture the unfolding drama. Captain Stone's eyes moved between Naomi and Melissa, then finally to Marcus. His tone brooked no argument. "Her ticket is valid. This incident ends now," but Naomi wasn't finished. Her voice, calm yet sharp, filled the space. "Captain, I requested a supervisor long before this. Instead, your crew chose to escalate, publicly accuse, and allow live recordings to spread unchecked. This is not about one seat. This is about dignity." The cabin fell silent, every passenger leaning in. Tyler's chat exploded. His live stream crossed 7,000 viewers. The feed flooded with outrage and admiration alike. Melissa stood frozen, her pride shattered, her authority crumbling. Marcus exhaled slowly, relief softening his features. Isabella felt tears sting her eyes, courage and gratitude rising together. Gerald nodded slowly, whispering under his breath, "About time." Captain Stone held Naomi's business card tightly, realization dawning with weight. This wasn't just a passenger. This was a partner, an owner, a leader, and she had chosen silence until now. For the first time since the confrontation began, Melissa Grant felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Fear. The silence that followed Captain Harold Stone's words was dense, almost suffocating. Dozens of passengers sat frozen, their eyes flicking between Naomi Sinclair and the crew members who had accused her. The weight of truth pressed heavy on the cabin, yet the tension did not vanish. It twisted, changed, became something sharper. Tyler Brooks' phone trembled slightly in his hand as his viewer count surged past 10,000. He whispered into the camera, his voice hushed with awe. "Did you guys hear that? She's not just any passenger. She's Dr. Naomi Sinclair, CEO. She owns the jets Orion flies. This is insane." The live-stream chat erupted instantly. Comments flew faster than anyone could read. "She owns the plane. The flight attendant's finished. Respect this queen. Orion's in trouble." Melissa Grant stood rigid, her throat dry, her palms sweating against the tablet she clutched. She had built her career on control, on authority in the cabin. But now her authority had unraveled in front of strangers, in front of phones, in front of the world. She swallowed hard, her mind racing for an escape, but every option felt like quicksand. Naomi's eyes swept slowly across the rows. She saw the doubt in some faces, the shame in others, the cautious admiration in a few. She had not shouted, not once, yet she had turned the balance of the room entirely. That power, quiet but undeniable, settled around her like a cloak. Still, inside, Naomi battled her own turmoil. Revealing her identity had never been her first choice. For years, she had wanted her work to speak louder than her name, her dignity to stand on its own without the shield of her titles. But humiliation, broadcast live, had forced her hand. She thought of her mother's words from years ago. "Sometimes silence is strength, Naomi, but sometimes silence protects the wrong people." She exhaled softly. This was no longer just about her. Captain Stone cleared his throat, turning slightly toward Melissa. His voice was calm, but firm. "Ms. Grant, You escalated a situation without verifying properly. That cannot happen again." Melissa's lips parted as though to defend herself, but no words came. She stood there, exposed, her authority slipping through her fingers. Before she could speak, Naomi's phone buzzed again, vibrating against the tray table. This time, she glanced at the screen. A single message from her legal counsel trending globally. "CNN already clipping the live stream. Stay calm." Naomi set the phone down deliberately, then looked back at Captain Stone. "This is not private anymore. It began publicly, and it will be resolved publicly." Her voice carried across the cabin, filling every corner. Passengers shifted, murmurs rising. Tyler leaned closer to his phone, whispering dramatically, "She's going public with it. This is history, guys. You're watching it happen live." Melissa's heart pounded. She could feel eyes burning into her from every angle. Every mistake, every word she had spoken, immortalized on phones and servers she couldn't control. A knot of fear twisted in her stomach. For the first time in her career, she wasn't the authority. She was the accused. Isabella Reyes felt her chest tighten, torn between fear and courage. She could stay silent and keep her internship safe. Or she could speak, risk everything, and tell the truth. She thought of her parents back home in Phoenix, the sacrifices they had made so she could chase this dream. Her lips trembled as she whispered to Gerald Hunt, "I can't just sit here." Gerald gave her a small nod, his voice low but steady. "Then don't." The words struck something deep inside her. She inhaled sharply, summoning strength she didn't know she had. Then she raised her voice, trembling but clear. "I saw her ticket. It was first class. Seat 1A. She belongs here." The cabin shifted instantly. Gasps rippled, heads turned. Isabella's face flushed, but she pressed on. "I was behind her at the gate. I saw it printed clear as day. They were wrong." Gerald's voice followed, deeper, stronger. "I've been a captain for 30 years. That ticket was valid. And I know who she is. Dr. Sinclair's company keeps this airline in the sky. She deserves respect." The passengers murmured louder now, the balance tipping further. Tyler's viewers exploded in the chat. Finally, someone spoke up. Intern got guts. Retired pilot backing her too. "Melissa's done." Melissa's composure cracked visibly. She took a step back, her knuckles white against her tablet. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice small. Naomi's gaze turned toward her, calm but piercing. "You didn't ask." The words fell like a gavel, final and damning. Tyler's phone shook as he whispered into the mic, "Oh my God, did you hear that she said, 'You didn't ask'?" This is going viral. This is already viral. In the back rows, passengers began applauding softly. It grew, row by row, hesitant at first, then louder. Isabella's hands shook as she joined in, tears stinging her eyes. Gerald clapped too, steady and deliberate, his expression solemn. Melissa froze, humiliated, the sound of applause striking her harder than any reprimand could. Captain Stone adjusted his cap, his jaw tight. "This flight will depart as scheduled. Dr. Sinclair's seat is valid. Any further disputes end here." But Naomi wasn't finished. She lifted her chin, her voice calm but resonant. "No, Captain, it doesn't end here. Not when the world is watching. Not when silence has allowed this kind of treatment to happen over and over again. Today, it ends differently." The applause swelled louder. Phones rose higher. Tyler's chat spiraled out of control, his viewership blasting past 15,000. Melissa's pulse hammered in her ears. For the first time, she wished the cabin would swallow her whole. Naomi turned slowly, her gaze sweeping across every passenger, every camera. This is not about one woman in one seat. It is about dignity. Every passenger, every traveler deserves respect. No exceptions. The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Passengers leaned forward, captivated. Tyler's face filled his own screen as he whispered, "She's changing everything right now. This is bigger than the flight. This is a movement." Naomi sat back in her seat, folding her hands gently in her lap. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't lashed out. And yet, in less than an hour, she had shifted the balance of power in the cabin, on the live stream, and across the internet. Melissa Grant stood in silence, her career unraveling in real time. Marcus Lee exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from his chest. Isabella wiped her eyes, both terrified and relieved. Gerald sat straighter, proud to witness dignity defended, and Captain Stone, holding Naomi's business card between his fingers, realized the truth that settled heavily in his chest. Dr. Naomi Sinclair wasn't just a passenger. She was the storm reshaping the sky. The first-class cabin of Orion Airlines Flight 618 no longer felt like a plane. It felt like a stage. Every passenger a witness, every phone a spotlight. Applause had subsided into a tense hush, but the energy did not fade. It only sharpened. Captain Harold Stone still held Naomi Sinclair's platinum-edged business card in his hand. He had flown thousands of passengers in his career, dignitaries and executives included. Yet he had never felt the weight of a single card like this. It was more than a name. It was power, and it carried the gravity of a storm rolling in. Melissa Grant stood rigid, her chest tight, her eyes locked on the floor. She wanted to disappear. But every second she stood in silence was another second her authority drained away. Naomi sat poised in seat 1A, her hands folded gently in her lap. She had not raised her voice. She had not demanded. Yet everyone in the cabin felt the quiet strength emanating from her, like the steady hum of the engines beneath their feet. And then, the sharp chime of Lisa Bennett's headset cut through the air. The senior flight manager had entered silently moments earlier, tablet in hand, trying to gauge the situation. Now she pressed her earpiece tighter, her brow furrowing. "Captain," she said carefully, "corporate wants a live update. They're monitoring the stream. Vanessa Cole, Regional Director, is on the line." The murmurs swelled again. Passengers leaned closer, whispering. Tyler Brooks swung his phone toward his face, his voice electric with excitement. "Guys, corporate is calling in. This is about to blow up even bigger." His live stream surged to over 20,000 viewers. The chat flooded with capital letters and fire emojis. Captain Stone hesitated. Protocol would usually mean handling matters quietly, away from passengers, but there was no quiet anymore. Too many cameras, too many witnesses. This had left the cabin the moment Tyler started streaming. Naomi's voice, calm but commanding, broke the pause, put her on speaker. Lisa blinked. Dr. Sinclair, perhaps Naomi's gaze met hers steadily. "You made this public. We will resolve it publicly." Lisa's throat tightened. She nodded reluctantly, tapping her tablet. Within seconds, the overhead speaker crackled, and a crisp, composed voice filled the cabin. "This is Vanessa Cole, Regional Director for Orion Airlines. We have been made aware of an incident on board Flight 618. Dr. Sinclair, are you there?" Naomi lifted her chin, her voice smooth. "I am." A collective inhale rippled through the cabin. Passengers glanced at each other, realizing this was no longer an airline dispute. It was corporate reckoning, live, mid-flight. Vanessa's voice carried a careful tone, professional but tense. "First, Dr. Sinclair, allow me to apologize on behalf of Orion Airlines for any misunderstanding. You are a valued partner and shareholder. We want to resolve this immediately." Melissa's stomach dropped. The words partner and shareholder twisted in her ears. She had thought she was dealing with an ordinary passenger. But no, she had tried to humiliate someone who held the keys to the very jets she worked on. Tyler turned the phone back on himself, whispering with wide eyes. "You guys heard that. Right. She's not just a CEO. She's a shareholder. This is massive." His chat exploded again. Viewership crossed 25,000. Naomi's tone remained even, but her words landed with weight. "Ms. Cole, your staff accused me publicly, on camera, of fraud. They attempted to remove me from a seat I purchased, despite my boarding pass being valid. This is not a misunderstanding. It is a pattern, and it ends today." The silence that followed was palpable. Even the engines seemed quieter. Vanessa hesitated, her voice cautious. "What would you like Orion Airlines to do?" Naomi exhaled softly, her thoughts racing. She remembered every boardroom where she'd been underestimated, every negotiation where she'd been asked to prove herself twice over, every quiet humiliation endured in the name of composure. The weight of those memories pressed against her ribs, but so did the eyes of the passengers, the viewers online, the world suddenly watching. Her answer came deliberate, unshakable. Melissa Grant is terminated immediately. Lisa Bennett is suspended pending review. And Orion Airlines will issue a formal public apology within 24 hours. Gasps echoed through the cabin. Melissa's face drained of color, her knees nearly buckling. Lisa's hands tightened around her tablet, her jaw rigid. Vanessa's voice crackled through the speakers, strained but controlled. "Dr. Sinclair, those are serious measures." Perhaps Naomi cut her off, her tone still calm but sharpened. "This was made serious when your crew escalated instead of verifying. When they allowed humiliation to spread unchecked on a live stream with tens of thousands of viewers. Immediate accountability is the only acceptable resolution." Tyler's phone shook in his grip as he whispered, "She's firing them live. She's actually doing it right here." His viewer count soared past 30,000. The cabin was electric. Some passengers clapped softly, others gasped, wide-eyed. Isabella Reyes felt her pulse hammering in her ears, but for the first time, she allowed herself a small, trembling smile. Vanessa's voice returned, quieter but resolute. "Consider it done. Effective immediately. Termination and suspension as requested. A public apology will be drafted and released within the hour." Melissa collapsed into the nearest jump seat, her hands covering her face. Lisa's shoulders slumped as she exhaled shakily. The reality of their downfall settled over them like ice. Naomi nodded once, her expression steady. "Good. But this does not end with 2 employees. I expect Orion Airlines to review its passenger protocols, implement mandatory bias training, and establish a system where travelers are not judged by appearance before being treated with dignity. Do you understand? Her words cut with precision. Passengers murmured again, many nodding. Gerald Hunt's weathered face softened into admiration. Isabella wiped her eyes, relief brimming. Vanessa's reply came after a long pause, her voice heavy. Understood. Dr. Sinclair, I will personally oversee the reforms. We will begin immediately. The cabin erupted with applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It was raw, emotional, unrestrained. Passengers rose to their feet, their hands striking together in rhythm. Isabella clapped hard, tears running down her cheeks. Gerald joined with steady dignity. Even Marcus Lee, still standing near the aisle, allowed a faint nod, respect glimmering in his eyes. Tyler turned his phone back on himself, his voice breaking with excitement. This is history. You're watching an airline change its policies live, mid-flight, because one woman refused to move. His chat exploded. Viewership passed 50,000. Hashtags soared into trending lists across platforms. Naomi sat quietly through the applause, her expression calm, her chest rising and falling in measured rhythm. Inside, though, her heart ached with a mix of exhaustion and resolve. She had not wanted this spectacle, but now that it had come, she would not let it go to waste. She glanced once toward Melissa, whose hands still covered her face, then to Lisa, standing stiff and pale. For a brief moment, Naomi felt the tug of empathy. They were human, flawed, blinded by bias, but human nonetheless. Her mother's words echoed again. Justice without compassion is just revenge. Naomi inhaled deeply, then spoke once more, her tone softer, but still resolute. Let this not be about punishment alone. Let it be about change. For every traveler, for every flight. The cabin fell silent again, passengers hanging on her words. Even Tyler lowered his phone slightly, his face struck by the weight of her voice. Captain Stone gave a single, solemn nod. Understood. Dr. Sinclair. And for the first time since boarding, Naomi allowed herself to lean back in her seat, her shoulders easing. She hadn't raised her voice once, but she had changed everything. By the time Orion Airlines Flight 618 reached cruising altitude, the cabin was no longer just a cabin. It was a newsroom, a courtroom, a theater. The hum of the engines faded into the background against the rhythm of rapid typing, the clicking of phones, and the rush of notifications. What had begun as a confrontation between a flight attendant and a passenger had grown into something much larger. It had become a story the world could not look away from. Tyler Brooks kept his phone angled just enough to capture Dr. Naomi Sinclair in seat 1A. His live stream viewer count passed 70,000. The chat scrolled so fast he could hardly keep up. People from New York, London, São Paulo, Johannesburg filled the feed with messages. Some were outraged, some were inspired. All were glued to the unfolding story. Naomi sat quietly, her hands resting on her lap. She did not chase the camera. She did not perform for it. Her silence alone carried the weight of authority. But inside, her thoughts pulsed in conflicting rhythms. She remembered boardrooms where she had been ignored, contracts where her expertise had been doubted, meetings where her words had been interrupted. This was not new. What was new was the scale. This time the doubt and disrespect were recorded, broadcast, undeniable. Melissa Grant sat collapsed in the jump seat, her eyes swollen, her face pale. The termination order still echoed in her mind like a gavel. Lisa Bennett stood near the galley, her tablet limp in her hands, the weight of suspension crushing her chest. Neither spoke, neither could. Captain Harold Stone had returned to the cockpit, though his mind lingered on the cabin. In decades of flying, he had seen unruly passengers, panicked emergencies, even mid-air brawls, but never this. Never the moment when an entire industry seemed to tilt on its axis inside his aircraft. Isabella Reyes still trembled in her seat, her courage only just beginning to settle. She scrolled her phone with shaky fingers, watching clips of herself speaking up already circulating online. She could hardly breathe seeing strangers type her name into comments, calling her brave. She did not feel brave. She felt terrified, but she also felt free. Gerald Hunt leaned back, his weathered hands folded across his lap. He had lived a lifetime in aviation, seen accidents and reforms, strikes and lawsuits, yet as he watched Naomi sit with quiet dignity, he thought to himself, this will be remembered long after the landing. Naomi's phone buzzed again, relentless. This time, she allowed herself to glance. Headlines already appeared on her lock screen. CNN breaking black CEO humiliated on Orion flight fights back. Bloomberg alerts stock volatility after viral airline incident. Social feeds erupted with hashtags Naomi Sinclair, you flight 68, you respect in the skies. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. This was bigger than her now. Tyler leaned closer to his phone, whispering dramatically, guys, CNN is already covering it. Bloomberg, too. The whole world is watching this plane right now. We are literally flying through history. His chat roared in response. Some mocked, most cheered. The numbers ticked higher, 90,000, 95, then 100,000 live viewers. Passengers in economy began murmuring too. News had reached them through Wi-Fi, through social media alerts pinging their devices. Some craned their necks forward, others whispered in disbelief. A woman whispered to her husband, the lady in first class. She owns the plane. He nodded slowly, his own phone glowing with headlines. Back in first class, Naomi finally opened her eyes. She looked across the aisle at Isabella, whose face was pale but whose eyes burned with emotion. Naomi gave her a small nod of gratitude. Isabella swallowed hard, her throat tight, then nodded back. That simple exchange was enough to steady her heart. Lisa's headset buzzed again. She pressed it reluctantly, her face strained. Vanessa Cole's voice came through, audible only to her, but Lisa paled as the words hit her. She looked up at Naomi, then cleared her throat nervously. Dr. Sinclair, corporate leadership is requesting to speak with you directly, not just regional. The CEO's office. The murmurs spiked again. Tyler nearly dropped his phone in excitement. Guys, did you hear that the CEO of Orion's parent company is calling her? This is insane. His chat spiraled. Viewership topped 120,000. Naomi tilted her head slightly. Speaker, she said. Lisa hesitated. Dr. Sinclair. Perhaps speaker, Naomi repeated, her voice firm. Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she tapped her tablet, syncing it to the overhead speaker. The cabin went silent, every passenger holding their breath. A deep, steady voice filled the space. Dr. Sinclair, this is Richard Halverson, CEO of Orion's parent company. I want to begin by apologizing to you directly. What happened on board Flight 618 is unacceptable. We are prepared to implement whatever resolution you deem necessary. Gasps rippled again. Tyler's phone nearly vibrated out of his hands as his viewers spammed the chat with fire emojis and capital letters. A CEO speaking live to a passenger mid-flight. It had never been done before. Naomi inhaled slowly, her voice measured when she replied, "Mr. Halverson, this is not just about me. It is about every traveler who has been doubted, dismissed, or disrespected because of their appearance. An apology will not erase that. Change must follow." Her words rolled through the cabin with the force of a tide. Passengers leaned forward, phones tilted higher. Tyler's chat exploded with applause emojis, fists, and words like queen and icon. The CEO's voice responded after a pause, heavy with tension. "Understood. Tell us what you require." Naomi's gaze swept the cabin slowly before she spoke. "Orion Airlines will implement mandatory bias and empathy training for all crew and staff. Passenger verification protocols will be overhauled, and a dedicated Equity and Dignity Council will be created, with passenger voices represented. These changes must be transparent and permanent." The cabin was silent except for the hum of the engines. Then Richard's voice came back, firm. "Consider it done. Effective immediately. I will authorize these measures. Dr. Sinclair, you have my word." Applause broke out again, louder this time. Some passengers even stood, clapping hard. Isabella's tears spilled freely as she joined in. Gerald nodded firmly, his applause steady. Marcus Lee allowed himself a faint smile, his respect clear. Melissa Grant remained silent, her face buried in her hands. Lisa Bennett's shoulders sagged, the weight of suspension heavy on her but tempered by the realization she had just witnessed history. Tyler whispered into his phone, his own voice shaking now. "She just forced a CEO to change airline policy live on this flight. Do you understand how big this is? This is bigger than anything I've ever streamed." His viewership crossed 150,000. Naomi did not smile. She did not revel. She simply closed her eyes again for a brief moment, exhaling softly. Inside, she felt the clash of exhaustion and strength. She had not asked for this fight, but now that it had come, she would see it through. When she opened her eyes, her voice came soft but resonant. "Let this moment remind us all. Power is not in humiliation. Power is in respect. Every seat on this plane, whether in first class or economy, carries a person deserving of dignity." The applause swelled again, filling the cabin with thunder. For the first time since the confrontation began, the air felt lighter, though still charged. Passengers were not just witnessing a dispute, they were witnessing a transformation. And as the plane soared high above the clouds, so too did the story. Beyond the cabin, beyond the airline, beyond the borders of one nation, the world was now watching. The engines of Flight 618 hummed steadily as the jet cut across the night sky. But inside the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The world had tuned in. Tyler Brooks' live stream was no longer just a stream. It had become a broadcast channel watched by hundreds of thousands. By the time the flight leveled off at 35,000 feet, viewership had passed 200,000, then climbed even higher. Every major news outlet had joined the stream, clipping moments, broadcasting sound bites, flooding social feeds with updates. CNN, BBC, and Reuters pushed breaking alerts. Twitter's trending board glowed with hashtags. Naomi Sinclair, Flight 618, respect in the skies. The story had slipped the confines of the cabin and now stretched across continents. Naomi Sinclair sat in seat 1A, poised, composed. Her eyes closed briefly as she inhaled and exhaled. On the surface, she was stone. Inside, the tremor of emotions pressed against her ribs. Anger still smoldered, not at Melissa Grant alone, but at the system that had allowed humiliation to feel routine. Fear hovered too, a reminder that the world she never sought had turned its eyes on her in real time. And yet, beneath it all, there was something steadier: resolve. Melissa remained in the jump seat, her head buried in her hands. Lisa Bennett stood frozen near the galley, headset pressed against her ear as corporate's instructions poured in. Marcus Lee leaned against the aisle wall, silent, his eyes darting between Naomi and the crew. Isabella Reyes clutched her phone tightly, her chest still heaving from the courage it had taken to speak up. Gerald Hunt sat tall, his eyes glinting with something like pride. Tyler whispered into his phone with uncharacteristic awe, "We are literally watching history. I don't know if you understand what's happening. A woman humiliated on her own jet just changed corporate policy live, and the whole world is watching." His chat exploded, a blur of emojis, applause, and messages from across the globe. Someone in Nairobi, someone in Seoul, someone in Rio, all tuned into the same moment above the Atlantic sky. Back on the ground, chaos spread like wildfire. In New York, anchors interrupted scheduled programming with breaking news from 35,000 feet. On Wall Street, Orion's stock began to slide in after-hours trading. Analysts speculated nervously as clips from the cabin replayed on television screens across trading floors. One video in particular. Naomi's calm voice saying, "You didn't ask," repeated endlessly, each replay carving deeper into the public consciousness. Naomi opened her eyes and glanced toward Isabella. The young intern looked both terrified and exhilarated, as though standing on the edge of something bigger than she ever expected. Naomi offered her a faint smile, enough to steady Isabella's breath. Then Lisa's voice cut into the silence. "Dr. Sinclair," she said softly, "corporate has confirmed your requests are being drafted into formal policy, but the board is asking if you would consider guiding the implementation yourself. They want you to chair an equity council." Gasps fluttered through the cabin. Tyler nearly dropped his phone, his eyes wide as he whispered to his viewers. "Do you hear this? They're asking her to lead reform. This is beyond anything I could have imagined." His viewership spiked again, racing past 300,000. Naomi tilted her head slowly. Her voice, when it came, was calm, steady, but weighted with consideration. "If I accept, this cannot be symbolic. This must be transparent, enforced, permanent." Lisa swallowed hard. "I'll relay that, Dr. Sinclair." For a moment, silence returned, though it was not the silence of fear anymore. It was expectation. Every passenger, every viewer, waited to see what she would do next. Naomi's mind, though steady on the outside, raced inside. She thought of her childhood, watching her mother fight quietly for dignity in spaces that did not welcome her. She thought of boardrooms where she had been mistaken for an assistant, not a leader. She thought of every black woman told she did not belong in the seat she had earned. This fight was not hers alone. She opened her eyes and spoke clearly, her voice carrying through the cabin and into the microphones of countless phones. "If Orion Airlines wants me to lead reform, it will not be as a favor to me. It will be as a commitment to every passenger who deserves dignity. I will accept only if this council is given the authority to change policy across the industry, not just within one company. The cabin stirred again, murmurs swelling. Isabella covered her mouth, her eyes brimming. Gerald nodded slowly, his chest swelling with respect. Tyler leaned closer to his phone, his voice hushed but electric. She's not just fixing one airline. She's about to change aviation. On Wall Street, trading boards lit up as Naomi's words rippled through the live stream, clipped and replayed within seconds. Investors whispered about systemic risk and reputational fallout. Orion's stock slid further, but at the same time, a different stock, Sinclair Aerotech, spiked upward as investors recognized her influence. Inside the cabin, Naomi remained unmoved by numbers or markets. Her gaze swept the passengers slowly. Some avoided her eyes, ashamed of their silence earlier. Others met her gaze, grateful. A mother in row 3 whispered to her son, "Remember this moment." Lisa's headset buzzed again. Her voice trembled as she relayed the message. "Dr. Sinclair, the board agrees. They want you to lead the council, with industry-wide reach, in cooperation with federal regulators. They'll allocate resources immediately." The cabin erupted with astonished murmurs. Tyler's hand shook as he tried to steady his phone. "Guys, I don't even know what to say. This is not a flight anymore. This is a revolution at 35,000 feet. Naomi inhaled deeply, then nodded once. "Then let it be so. But let the world know this. Change will not come because of one seat or one woman. Change will come because silence is no longer tolerated." Applause burst out again, louder, stronger, rolling through the cabin like thunder. Phones tilted higher, recording from every angle. Isabella clapped with tears streaming down her face. Gerald joined, his palms striking firmly, steady as a drumbeat. Marcus Lee gave a subtle nod of respect, his eyes gleaming. Melissa did not clap. She sat frozen, her world shattered. Lisa clapped weakly, her shoulders sagging under the weight of suspension, but also the faint relief of seeing transformation unfold. And Naomi sat still, her voice calm as she added, "This is bigger than me. This is bigger than Orion. This is about respect. This is about dignity. This is about every passenger, every worker, every human being who deserves to be seen fully and treated fairly." The applause swelled until it filled the cabin. Tyler's phone buzzed with nonstop notifications. His chat screamed in all caps, global languages mixing on one screen. Viewership soared past 500,000. The world was not just watching. The world was listening. At 35,000 feet, the jet cut a silver line across the Atlantic. But the cabin felt like the center of the world. Every second, the story of Flight 618 stretched further, pulled into living rooms, news studios, trading floors, and government offices. Passengers inside the aircraft sat suspended between disbelief and awe, caught in the middle of a global spectacle. Naomi Sinclair sat quietly in 1A, her posture composed, though her pulse raced beneath the calm. She had spoken her terms. She had demanded accountability, not only for herself, but for every traveler treated as less than. And somehow, in less than an hour, her words had reshaped the future of an airline. But she knew it wasn't finished. The battle was only beginning. Tyler Brooks still whispered breathlessly into his phone. 500,000 people are watching this. No, wait, look at that. 600,000. This is insane. You're watching aviation change in real time. His chat scrolled faster than his eyes could follow. Applause emojis, raised fists, hearts from across the globe, comments in Spanish, French, Korean, Arabic. The entire world was speaking in one voice. In row 3, a mother dabbed her eyes, whispering to her teenage son, "Do you see her? Do you hear her? This is what strength looks like. Remember it?" Her son nodded, wide-eyed, holding his phone steady as he streamed. In New York, anchors on cable news repeated Naomi's words in real time. "This is about dignity." They quoted, the phrase now plastered across headlines. In London, analysts debated how quickly regulators would respond. In Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Sao Paulo, commentators framed Naomi as a symbol of resilience against systemic disrespect. And on Wall Street, chaos brewed. Orion's stock had dropped nearly 8% in after-hours trading. Traders leaned over monitors, frowning at live clips of Naomi's calm face, her steady words, her refusal to be moved. At the same time, Sinclair, Aerotech's stock spiked. Investors whispered if she could bend an airline, what else could she influence inside the cabin? Lisa Bennett's headset buzzed again. Her voice cracked slightly as she repeated the update. "Dr. Sinclair, the FAA has requested a transcript of this exchange. Regulators are watching the live stream." A wave of gasps swept the rows. Gerald Hunt muttered under his breath, his tone reverent. "She's got the FAA's attention mid-flight. That's history." Naomi tilted her head slowly, her voice calm when she replied, "Good. They should be watching. This is their responsibility as much as Orion's." Melissa Grant flinched at the words, pressing her palms harder against her face. The humiliation was unbearable, but the weight of Naomi's truth pressed in, too. Tyler's voice trembled as he spoke to his phone. "Guys, this isn't just about one airline anymore. The FAA is involved. This could change federal policy. This could set new standards for everyone who flies." His viewer count surged again, crossing 700,000. Naomi inhaled deeply, her mind turning inward. She thought of her mother's voice telling her, "Strength isn't noise, it's consistency." She thought of her father's warning, "Silence is complicity." Both voices mingled in her chest, reminding her that the moment was larger than her own pride. She opened her eyes and spoke again, her words measured but piercing. "If the FAA is watching, let them hear this. Discrimination does not delay flights, it delays justice, and justice has been delayed for too long. If they want safety in the skies, they must begin with dignity on the ground." Phones lifted higher. The statement echoed across millions of screens within seconds. Cable news anchors repeated it word for word. Hashtags multiplied. "There's dignity in the skies." Naomi speaks. In Washington, aides rushed into congressional offices with tablets in hand. A senator stared at Naomi's face on the screen and muttered, "She's right. We can't dodge this one." The FAA's own public affairs team scrambled to draft a statement. In the cabin, applause broke again, not scattered but rolling, like waves cresting and crashing. Isabella Reyes clapped until her palms stung, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. She whispered through trembling lips, "She's rewriting the rules." Gerald's voice, gravelly but firm, carried across the applause. "In all my years, I've never seen a passenger change the air up here. She's not flying on this plane. She's flying above it." Tyler turned his camera toward Gerald, whispering, That's a retired pilot talking. You guys hear this?" His chat erupted. The viewer count crossed 800,000. Naomi sat still, her hands folded gently. She did not cheer, she did not clap, but a thought pressed heavy in her mind. This would not end when the plane landed. The live stream had given her a platform, but it was her responsibility to ensure it became more than a viral story. It had to become a movement. Lisa's headset pinged again. She listened, nodded once, and then spoke. "Dr. Sinclair, the FAA will issue a preliminary statement tonight. They want to work with you on formal standards." Gasps again. Passengers glanced at one another, their disbelief mounting. Tyler whispered fiercely into his phone, "Did you hear that she's about to write aviation law? This is unreal." Naomi breathed out slowly, her words quiet but sharp. If they are serious, then they must commit to more than words. Training, verification, accountability, and consequences for every failure. Her voice sank deeper into the cabin's silence, each word etched into memory. Phones captured every syllable, every stillness, every steady gaze. Outside, the night sky stretched infinite and quiet. But inside, the cabin pulsed with the sound of change. Back on the ground, market tickers scrolled frantically. FAA to review bias protocols. Orion Airlines collapses in trading after viral incident. Naomi Sinclair emerges as face of equity in aviation. Investors speculated about her potential to lead industry-wide reforms. Advocacy groups began drafting open letters demanding action, and hashtags surged past 1 million mentions in less than an hour. In the cabin, Isabella leaned forward, whispering toward Naomi, though her voice trembled. "Thank you. Not just for yourself, for all of us." Naomi's gaze softened slightly as she nodded. "This is about us all. Isabella, always." Tyler's camera caught the exchange, his voice hushed but reverent. "Guys, do you feel that this isn't just a story anymore? This is personal for everyone." As the applause died down, silence returned once more. But it wasn't heavy this time. It was alive, charged, waiting. The kind of silence before something new begins. Naomi looked out the window. The darkness of the sky stretched endlessly, but tiny cities glittered faintly below, reminders of the people her words might touch. Her heart beat steady as she whispered to herself, too low for microphones but enough for her own ears. "We are not invisible anymore." The engines roared on, steady and constant. And so did her resolve. The world was not just watching Flight 618. The world was waiting for what came next. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, a steady backdrop to the storm of attention circling above and below them. Flight 618 was no longer just a flight. It had become a tribunal in the sky, a council chamber, a stage where one woman's quiet defiance had turned into a reckoning for an entire industry. Naomi Sinclair sat upright in 1A, her body calm, but her mind alive with thoughts that flickered like lightning. She felt the gravity of what was happening, the pull of millions of eyes upon her. She had never asked for this spotlight, yet she knew she could not walk away from it now. She thought of her company, Sinclair Aerotech, of the engineers and staff who looked up to her. She thought of her family, of her late mother's whisper in her memory. Strength is steady, not loud. She thought of the countless passengers who had endured humiliation in silence, with no one to witness their pain. Tonight, there were witnesses everywhere. Tyler Brooks's phone buzzed in his trembling hand as viewership crossed 900,000. His voice cracked as he whispered to his audience, She's about to change everything. This is bigger than I ever imagined. We might be watching the moment aviation rewrites itself." Isabella Reyes stared at Naomi with wide eyes, her own phone forgotten in her lap. She had never believed she would witness something of this scale, much less be part of it. She thought about the internship she had doubted she could succeed in. Now her name was appearing in chats around the world as people praised her bravery. Her chest swelled with both fear and pride. Gerald Hunt leaned forward in his seat, his hands clasped together like a man in prayer. He had lived through decades of change in the skies, deregulation, strikes, accidents, reforms, but what Naomi was doing now was different. She wasn't just demanding safety or efficiency. She was demanding humanity. That, he thought, would leave a mark far deeper than any technical reform. Lisa Bennett pressed her headset closer as corporate's voices rattled in her ear. She cleared her throat and spoke, her voice unsteady. "Dr. Sinclair, the FAA is drafting a live statement. They want to coordinate with you directly. They've requested to patch into the cabin audio." Gasps rose through the rows. Tyler's eyes widened, his whisper sharp. "Guys, the FAA is about to come on this call. Mid-flight. I can't believe this." Naomi tilted her head slightly, her voice measured. "Put them through." Lisa tapped her tablet nervously. A sharp click followed, then a new voice filled the cabin, crisp and formal. "Dr. Sinclair, this is Daniel Mercer, Director of Aviation Standards at the FAA. We are monitoring this situation closely. We've seen the live stream. We are deeply concerned and prepared to take immediate steps." The entire cabin held its breath. Gerald muttered under his breath, "Never in my life did I think I'd hear the FAA talk directly to a passenger in flight." Naomi's gaze remained steady, her words calm. "Mr. Mercer, I appreciate your presence, but concern without action changes nothing. This is not just about me. This is about every traveler who has been doubted, dismissed, or disrespected." There was a pause before Mercer's voice returned, more deliberate now. "You're right. Dr. Sinclair, we are prepared to explore systemic changes. What would you recommend as immediate federal reforms?" The cabin stirred again. Passengers leaned forward, their eyes locked on Naomi. Tyler's audience count ticked higher, crossing 1 million. Comments blurred across the screen, voices from across the globe demanding to hear her answer. Naomi inhaled slowly, her mind racing with the weight of the moment. Inside, she wrestled with doubt. She was a CEO, not a regulator, but she knew what passengers needed because she had lived it. She thought of the humiliation still burning on her skin, and of the countless unseen humiliations faced by others. Her voice, when it came, was low but firm. 3 reforms: mandatory empathy and bias training for every airline employee, from executives to crew, transparent passenger verification protocols so no one is accused without evidence, and a federal oversight body to enforce accountability when airlines fail. The words fell like stones into the silence. Tyler's phone shook in his hand. His voice broke as he whispered, "She just laid out a federal reform plan mid-flight." My God. His chat exploded, hearts and clapping emojis cascading. Mercer's voice returned, deliberate and grave. "We will bring these proposals to immediate review. I cannot promise outcomes tonight, but I can promise the process begins now. The FAA will meet with you, Dr. Sinclair, within 72 hours of your landing. Applause thundered through the cabin. Some passengers stood, clapping fiercely. Isabella cried openly, clapping hard, whispering, "She's doing it. She's doing it for all of us." Gerald's applause was steady, his nod one of deep respect. Marcus Lee gave a slow nod from his position, his eyes sharp with admiration. Melissa remained silent in the jump seat, her face buried in her hands. The magnitude of what she had triggered was unbearable to her, but Naomi did not glance at her once. This was no longer about her humiliation. It was about reform. Naomi's eyes closed briefly, her chest rising and falling. Inside, her thoughts twisted in quiet conflict. The responsibility weighed heavily, almost crushing. Could she bear the burden of leading this change? Could she hold steady under the scrutiny of millions? Yet the answer pressed steady from within. She had to. She opened her eyes again, her voice calm but carrying weight. "Mr. Mercer, understand this. Policy without enforcement is theater. If the FAA commits to this, it must enforce it with transparency and consequence, otherwise nothing changes." There was a long pause. Then Mercer's voice returned, firm. "Understood, Dr. Sinclair. We will not make this symbolic. We will make it systemic." Applause roared again, echoing through the cabin. Tyler's stream crossed 1.2 million. Headlines flashed across global networks. FAA commits to reforms after Flight 618. Naomi Sinclair calls for systemic accountability. In that moment, Naomi leaned back in her seat, her heart pounding with both exhaustion and strength. She thought of her mother again, whispering, "Strength is steady, not loud." She had not shouted once, yet the world was listening. Tyler turned the camera back on himself, his voice hushed but awed. "You guys, I started this stream thinking I'd catch some drama in first class. Now I'm streaming history. I was wrong about her. I judged her like everyone else. But she is changing the entire industry right now, mid-flight." The chat scrolled endlessly, viewers from every continent flooding it with messages of support. Some shared their own stories of discrimination in travel. Others simply wrote her name with hearts beside it. Naomi gazed around the cabin slowly. She saw passengers who once avoided her eyes now looking at her with respect. She saw Isabella glowing with pride, Gerald nodding with quiet certainty. Even Lisa, suspended and shaken, looked at her with something close to admiration. She let the silence linger, then spoke softly. "This is not about me. This is about all of us, and together we will make the skies a place of dignity." The applause rose once more, loud and unrestrained, echoing into the night sky. The cabin of Flight 618 had transformed from a quiet sanctuary of first class into something unrecognizable. It was no longer just a row of polished seats and folded blankets. It was a stage where history unfolded in real time, where every whisper carried weight and every pause rippled outward to millions. Naomi Sinclair sat steady in her seat, her Tiffany necklace catching the faint light overhead. She hadn't moved much in the last hour, yet the world had moved around her, bending, reshaping itself under the pressure of her calm defiance. The FAA had entered the cabin through the invisible line of a speaker. Corporate had bent under her demands. Social media had elevated her into a global headline, and yet inside, Naomi battled a storm that none could see. Was she ready to be more than a CEO? Could she shoulder the burden of becoming a symbol? She thought of her staff at Sinclair Aerotech, the hundreds who looked to her for leadership. She thought of her niece, a young girl who once asked, "Auntie, will they always think we don't belong?" She thought of her mother's voice, the lessons stitched into her bones. You will be doubted. You will be dismissed, but you must never be diminished. The silence inside her seat felt heavy. Around her, the world buzzed. Tyler Brooks clutched his phone with trembling hands as the viewer count climbed past 1.5 million. His chat was unreadable now, a blur of capital letters, emojis, applause, anger, and hope. He whispered into the mic, his voice unsteady. "Guys, I don't even know what to say. We're not watching a passenger anymore. We're watching a leader. She's rewriting aviation while still in the air." Isabella Reyes pressed her hands against her cheeks, her heart pounding. She had lived in fear of speaking up earlier, but Naomi's strength had opened something inside her, a door she hadn't known existed. She thought of her immigrant parents, their sacrifices to put her in this internship, and whispered to herself, "She's fighting for me too." Gerald Hunt leaned back in his seat, arms folded, eyes glinting with quiet satisfaction. He had flown jets through storms, across oceans, through chaos, but never had he seen one passenger shift an industry mid-flight. He muttered under his breath, "They'll teach this in schools one day." Lisa Bennett stood stiffly in the aisle, headset pressed close as corporate commands poured in. She looked pale, worn, her earlier confidence long gone. She had followed protocol without thinking, had sided with Melissa without verifying, and now she felt the crushing weight of that choice. Suspended. Yes. But worse, she was part of a story that would follow her forever. Melissa Grant remained curled in the jump seat, her hands covering her face. The humiliation she had inflicted on Naomi now rebounded with tenfold force. Every word replayed on millions of phones, every cruel glance dissected by strangers across continents. She was silent, but the silence was filled with fear. Naomi exhaled slowly and opened her eyes. She looked around the cabin, at the passengers who once avoided her gaze but now stared with respect. She let her voice flow, soft but firm. Symbols are dangerous. They can inspire, but they can also distract. I am not a symbol. I am a person, a woman who has lived through too many rooms where dignity was denied. But if you need me to stand here as a symbol tonight, then I will. Not for me, for all of us. Her words carved through the cabin like a blade of truth. Phones tilted higher. Tyler's chat erupted with thunderous applause. Hashtags soared even higher, breaking into global top trends. Naomi Sinclair, not a symbol, dignity in the skies. In Washington, aides stormed into late-night sessions on Capitol Hill. Senators reviewed the stream live, their jaws tight, their aides scribbling notes. One congresswoman leaned forward and said aloud, "She's writing the bill for us right now. We either join her or we'll be crushed under this wave." In London, the BBC cut into programming with live commentary. In Johannesburg, a news anchor declared, "Tonight, the skies themselves became a parliament." In Sao Paulo, radio hosts described Naomi's words as a manifesto carried across oceans. Inside the cabin, Naomi pressed her hand briefly against her chest, grounding herself. She felt the storm of history pressing on her shoulders, heavier with every word. For a flicker of a moment, she wished she could vanish back into anonymity, to just be Naomi, not the CEO, not the leader, not the voice. But she also knew the truth. She had no right to vanish now. Too many were watching, Too many needed her steady. Tyler's voice cracked as he addressed his audience again. I was wrong about her. I thought this was entertainment. But it's not. It's justice. And I'll say it, I judged her just like Melissa did, and I regret it. But the difference is, I get to change. We all do. His viewers flooded the chat with words of solidarity, stories of their own experiences of discrimination. Tears confessed through emojis and trembling typed words. The stream had become more than a broadcast. It was a confession booth, a rally, a collective reckoning. Naomi turned her head toward Lisa. What is corporate saying now? Lisa swallowed, her voice shaky. They're preparing a public apology. They want you to approve the language before it's released. Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly. Tell them this. An apology written in fear is hollow. It must come from accountability, not survival. Otherwise, I'll release my own statement before we land. Lisa nodded quickly, pressing her headset tighter as she relayed the message. Her face flushed, knowing Naomi's words would slice through Orion's boardroom like knives. Gerald leaned forward slightly, his gravelly voice calm. She's not just teaching them how to treat a passenger, she's teaching them how to lead. The mother in row 3 dabbed her eyes again. She whispered to her son, remember her name. Remember Naomi Sinclair. Naomi felt their eyes on her, but her own thoughts pulled inward. She wrestled with the fear of being elevated into something untouchable. What if they turned her into a saint, only to discard her later? What if this wave of support was fleeting, leaving her exposed and alone? But then she thought of her niece again, of Isabella's tears, of the mother's whisper, and she knew she couldn't stop now. She spoke again, her tone soft but steady. I am not perfect. I am not untouchable. I am one woman who was humiliated for daring to exist in a seat she earned. But if my voice tonight makes it harder for the next crew to dismiss someone who looks like me, then it is worth it. If it makes one little girl believe she belongs in every room, every seat, then it is worth it. The cabin erupted again, applause crashing against the walls, filling the space with thunder. Tyler's stream counter blinked past 1.7 million. Viewers typed furiously, "She speaks for us. History in real time. This is our Rosa Parks in the sky." Naomi inhaled deeply, letting the applause wash over her, but she did not smile. She could not. She knew this was only the beginning. What awaited her on the ground would be even heavier press conferences, lawsuits, shareholders, regulators. She would have to fight battles far messier than this cabin, but tonight she had set the standard. She whispered to herself, too softly for others, but just enough for her own resolve. Symbols fade, standards last. The engines roared on, carrying them closer to New York, and Naomi Sinclair sat steady in her seat, bracing not for landing, but for the future waiting to greet her. The descent into New York was smooth, but the cabin of Flight 618 felt anything but calm. Every passenger sensed it. They were about to touch down not just in a city, but in history. Phones buzzed, cameras still rolled, and the live stream audience had ballooned past 2 million. Outside, Manhattan's lights glittered like a net waiting to catch the jet, a city bracing for a storm of its own. Naomi Sinclair sat steady in her seat, her seatbelt fastened, her posture unyielding. She hadn't raised her voice once since this ordeal began, yet her words had shaken governments, corporations, and millions of strangers. She looked out the small oval window at the glowing skyline. A part of her longed to vanish into the anonymity of the city, to step out as no more than a traveler arriving late at night. But she knew anonymity was gone. The moment the doors opened, she would step into cameras, microphones, and headlines. Her phone buzzed again with dozens of notifications she ignored. CNN, BBC, Bloomberg, investors, journalists, even politicians were waiting. Naomi closed her eyes for a brief moment and whispered inwardly, "Steady now. Steady like Mother taught you." Tyler Brooks whispered into his phone as the landing gear lowered with a muted thud. "Guys, here we go. Touchdown into history. 2 million people are with us right now. This is insane." His audience exploded with anticipation, emojis flooding his screen faster than he could follow. Isabella Reyes pressed her palms against her thighs, her heart racing. She had entered this flight a timid intern, afraid to speak against authority. Now, she felt as though she had witnessed the birth of a revolution. She told herself silently, "Remember this. Carry it with you." Gerald Hunt leaned closer to Naomi, his voice low but warm. "Whatever waits out there, know this: you've already changed the course. No matter what corporate says, no matter what the press spins, the truth is already out." Naomi gave him the faintest nod, but inside, her thoughts swirled with conflict. Would they reduce her to a headline? Would they twist her into something she was not? She feared the way symbols could be manipulated, stripped of humanity. But she also knew she had planted seeds too deep to be ignored. The wheels struck the runway with a jolt, and the cabin erupted in scattered applause. Phones tilted higher. Tyler shouted into his mic, "We've landed." She's about to walk into a wall of press. "Don't you dare log off. Stay with us." As the plane taxied, Lisa Bennett's headset crackled with urgent updates. She paled, then looked toward Naomi. "Dr. Sinclair, JFK is swarming with media, police, FAA reps. Even congressmen are at the gate. Corporate wants to escort you out privately through a back exit." Naomi's gaze was steady as she replied, "No. They made this public when they humiliated me in public. We will finish it in the open." The words rippled through the cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, some whispering, some clapping softly. Isabella bit her lip, tears threatening again. Gerald muttered with quiet pride, "She doesn't hide. Not now. Not ever." Melissa Grant whimpered faintly from the jump seat. For the first time she spoke, her voice thin. "Dr. Sinclair, I'm sorry." The words trembled with fear more than remorse, but Naomi didn't turn her head. She had already given her judgment. Melissa would face consequences on the ground. As the plane rolled to a stop, Captain Harold Stone's voice came over the intercom. Deep, steady, deferential. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to New York. Please remain seated. There will be a special deplaning procedure." His pause carried meaning. He too understood the weight of what was about to happen. The seatbelt sign chimed off, but no one moved. All eyes turned to Naomi. She rose slowly, adjusting her charcoal blazer, the silver of her necklace glinting under the overhead light. The quiet dignity of the gesture commanded more respect than any speech. Tyler whispered breathlessly into his mic, "She's standing. This is it. Oh my God, guys, this is history walking." The cabin door opened with a hiss. Outside, flashes lit the jet bridge like a storm of lightning. Dozens of cameras, microphones, reporters shouting over each other. Behind them, uniformed FAA officials and police officers stood in stiff lines, their expressions caught between protocol and awe. Lisa glanced at Naomi nervously. "They're waiting for you." Naomi stepped forward. Each movement felt deliberate, every footstep echoing louder than the engines that had carried them. She paused at the doorway, turned briefly toward the cabin, and spoke one final time to her fellow passengers. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the silence. Tonight wasn't about one seat. It was about respect. Remember this moment, not for me, but for every traveler who deserves dignity. Carry it with you. The cabin erupted in applause. Isabella stood and clapped fiercely, her tears unhidden. Gerald rose too, his weathered hands coming together in rhythm. Even Marcus Lee gave a solemn nod, his hand resting on his belt as though saluting her without words. Naomi stepped onto the jet bridge. The roar hit instantly. Cameras flashing, voices shouting questions, the crush of lights and noise. For a moment it felt overwhelming, a tidal wave threatening to swallow her whole. But she steadied her breath, reminded herself again, steady, not loud. An FAA official stepped forward, microphone clipped to his lapel. "Dr. Sinclair, the agency is prepared to work with you immediately. Can you confirm your demands for the record?" Naomi met his gaze calmly. "3 things: empathy and bias, training for all, transparent verification before accusations, and federal accountability when airlines fail. Not later. Now." The words carried over the microphones, transmitted instantly to every network, every stream. Anchors repeated them within seconds. Hashtags surged higher. Now, not later, join in the flood. Reporters shouted more questions, but Naomi raised her hand lightly. "You've all heard me. You'll hear more soon. Tonight, let's remember one truth: silence protects injustice, and I will not be silent." She moved forward, escorted not by corporate security but by the applause of strangers lining the gate area. Travelers in economy had spilled into the terminal, many holding their phones high, filming, cheering. Some chanted her name, others simply clapped, their faces shining with recognition. Tyler's stream hit 3 million viewers as he followed at a distance, narrating through trembling breaths. "This is unreal. She just walked into history. I'll never forget this flight. None of us will." Naomi walked calmly through the storm, her heart steady. She knew battles awaited boardrooms, courts, hearings. She knew opponents would try to smear her, dilute her, strip her into sound bites. But she also knew the tide had turned too far to reverse. The passengers had witnessed it. The world had watched it. And once dignity is seen, it cannot be unseen. As she exited the terminal, the night air of New York wrapped around her like a mantle. Reporters still shouted, flashes still blazed, but for one quiet moment she looked up at the sky. She thought of her niece, of Isabella, of every stranger who had written her name tonight as if it meant hope. She whispered to herself, a promise carried only by the wind. This isn't the end. This is the beginning. And with that, Dr. Naomi Sinclair walked into legacy. And so, Flight 618 ended not as a journey between cities, but as the spark of a movement. In that first-class cabin, Dr. Naomi Sinclair reminded the world that dignity is not optional. She showed that silence in the face of prejudice protects only injustice, and that even one steady voice can bend the course of an industry. The faces of those passengers told the story. Fear turned to courage, judgment replaced by respect. A timid intern found her voice, a live streamer discovered humility, A retired pilot saw hope for the future, and millions watching from around the globe felt, for the first time, that change was possible, because a black woman refused to be diminished. But the question lingers: how many more flights? How many more gates? How many more moments of quiet discrimination remain unseen? And who will be the next to stand, steady but unyielding, when the world says they don't belong? If this story moved you, let it stay with you. Carry it into your own encounters. Choose respect. Choose dignity. And if you believe these stories matter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because together, we're building more than a channel. We're building a voice that cannot be ignored.